So tonight we're going to start our series, Porn Kills Love. And this first part of it, I'm not going to actually talk about the Bible until the very end. I have one verse. The reason I'm going to do it this way is because I want to actually prove to you guys that porn use is a real problem. Now, you may say, Tyler, I don't have a porn problem, right? I don't really watch that, whatever, so why should I care about this series? That's not my problem. Maybe other people have that. I don't have that. If that's you, here's why you need to understand this. It's because porn use is a global problem that affects everything. It is not some individual problem that individual people have and that's it. We're going to get into how porn use, porn as an industry, affects the entire world. It affects you on a brain level. It affects you. It affects your relationships, and it absolutely affects the state of the world and human trafficking and other crazy things. And we're going to get into that. So whether you struggle with this or not, tonight we're focusing on talking about the facts of porn use, how the porn industry works. We're going to get into some crazy stuff that you guys probably have never heard before. And I just want to give a fair warning, though. Some of the facts and statistics that we're going to talk about may make you uncomfortable. This is not a comfortable topic. There's no way to beat around the bush. It's not comfortable. It is awkward at times. It is going to make you personally, if this is something you struggle with, and you're going to know some of these things before I even say it. But listen, the purpose of this series is to let us all be on the same page. We've got to understand this is a problem. And then, each additional week, we're going to work through how do we deal with this problem in our own lives. And if not in your life, here's some advice for how you can help other people who are struggling with it. And like I said, I think last week I kind of mentioned, I said, the series is not, hey, porn's bad, don't watch it, the end. That's dumb. And I think too many youth groups have this idea that all they need to do is tell you that porn's bad and tell you, okay, ready, set, don't watch it. Ready, set, don't have a smartphone. That's the solution. Guys, that's a dumb solution. We're going to give actual solutions as we go through this series, but we got to establish why it is a problem. And we're going to start with some statistics, all right? So if you're taking notes, every blank will be able to be filled in. It's all nice and organized for you. It's all right there. Here is the first statistic that you need to know about. 90% of men and 70% of women watch porn. Now, this does not mean every day. It just means in their life, about 90% of women and 70% of men have watched or are currently watching porn. Okay? Now, what? 90% of men and 70% of women.
The second time you said 90% of women.
Okay, well you can read. All right. Anyway, the reason so on this statistic, this is actually updated. For those, I think, Shaylin, you may have been here when I did it the first time. Maybe. I don't remember. The last time I did this series, about 3 years ago, this statistic was different. It was actually about 75% of men and about 30% of women. That number has gone up. For Christians specifically, men and women, it's 65% of men and 15% of women regularly watch pornography. So that means in a room, we have about 20 people in here, and it's about divided evenly. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 girls, whatever. The statistics would say if you're in a room of 10 guys, 6 to 7 of them, Christians, are struggling with this. And 1 to 2 out of 10 women in the church are struggling with this. Now, I'm not saying that that's literally the number in here, but I'm saying statistically that's a way to understand the problem. So I need you guys to understand this is not, I think at this point we all know it's not some thing that only a couple people deal with. It is a very big problem across the board. Second statistic, almost 25% of all internet searches are for porn. Everything that you could imagine that people are Googling, right? Googling about, learning about the Ford F-150 and Googling all this stuff about, the new, Nintendo Switch games coming out, whatever. Anything and everything you can imagine, 25% of all searches are searching for pornographic content. That is a lot. All right? Does everybody have that? 25% of all internet. And if you want to summarize it in your own words, you can do that. It doesn't have to be exact. All right, just so y'all can I try to give y'all space to do it yourselves, all right? All right, number 3, porn searches. This was the one that by far should scare you. Porn searches go up 4,700% after public school gets out. It's like, at 3:30 p.m., 4 p.m., pornographic searches go up almost 5,000%. So hold on. Hey, something I want to say as we go through this. And I want to make this very clear. The last time I did this series, as I was going through the whole thing, the first night's the hardest because we got to deal with the facts of it. I want to make it very clear that we are not joking about this. We're not laughing about this. Because see, here's the problem. People out there, people who are not Christian and people in your schools, and guys, I know what locker room talk is. I know what kind of stuff is said in there. That kind of stuff, listen, I need y'all to listen very carefully, is not going to be tolerated in this series. We are not making light of this problem. We are not laughing at it because here's the problem. Almost every man and a lot of women struggle with this very issue, and a lot of people would rather laugh about it because that's their way of trying to avoid the awkwardness that it's a real problem in their life. So we're not going to laugh and make fun of this. We're not going to joke in the way that you would joke in your locker room at school. And I don't care who you are. I don't care how long I've known you. I'm not tolerating it. Y'all, is that understood? We need to understand how serious this is. 5,000%. That's how much porn searches go up after school. So what does that tell you? Who's the biggest audience of porn consumption? Young people, underage, minors, all right? Here's statistic number 4. The average age of exposure to pornography is 12 years old. That is when most people are being exposed to pornography. It could be through a friend. It could be through a Google search that turned up stuff that they weren't expecting for. It could be from an adult. There are lots of incidences where young people are exposed to pornography by adults. We'll give them magazines and other illegitimate material. You got pedophiles out there trying to share explicit material with kids. But the average age, as of right now, is 12 years old. And by the way, that number is getting lower. You go back in the day, that number used to be higher, much higher. Because it was difficult to find pornography before internet. Basically the only kind of pornography that existed was in magazines, and you had to be a certain age to buy it. But now, it's everywhere, and anybody can have access to it with little to no restriction. So now, we have a bunch of 12-years-olds about when they start viewing and seeing pornography. And here's the last one. Sunday is the biggest day of the week for porn use. Of all the days of the week, porn websites get the most web traffic on Sunday versus any other day of the week. The day which should be set apart for glorifying God and worshiping Him is the day that has the most porn traffic of any other day of the week. So, regardless of whether or not you want to say porn is bad from a Christian perspective, we're not getting into the Bible. These are just the statistics of the way that things are. This is the state of porn use in this country and across the world. It's a problem. Okay? So I hope I can establish that for you. Now, what we're going to talk about next, there's 3 different areas that we're going to talk about of how porn affects. We're going to talk about how it affects your brain first, how it affects your own psychology. You may be shocked at the stuff we're going to talk about. We're also going to talk about how it affects your relationships with other people, including your romantic ones, and definitely how it would affect your marriage. I don't know you guys are married, but you need to understand it does affect married people. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how it affects the world. And these things are going to get increasingly, let's say, serious as we go on. But so we're just going to start with, on an individual level, how does it affect you if you have a porn addiction, okay? So I have 4 things, so 4 blanks on your notes, so you can just fill those in. Again, if you need to summarize it in your own words, you can do that. But let's start. Number 1, the first thing we're going to talk about, how it affects your brain. It provides a chemical overload. So most of you guys have probably heard that there are drug users out there. And you probably, if you've ever met a person who's strung out on drugs, you've ever seen them, you go to downtown Dallas, you can see quite a few of them, all right? One of the most common things, and this is what people don't understand, drug users never start on the hardest drugs. They never start off with a hardcore addiction, all right? Most drug users started with something that they were just encouraged to try by a friend. And so what's happening chemically in your brain when you take really any kind of drug, you name it, the drug is designed to bring out chemicals in your brain that are natural. but it's designed to flood your brain in an excessive amount. One of those chemicals is dopamine. If you've ever heard of dopamine, all right? Dopamine is known as the pleasure chemical, the happy chemical. If you've ever, if you play in a video game, you got whatever, you maxed out a gun on Call of Duty, you got the ultimate skin, right? You have a hit of dopamine. That's that moment of excitement and joy, right? That's your brain producing dopamine. There's like a moment of pleasure and satisfaction from something that you've done. So dopamine in and of itself is not bad. Your body produces it, your brain produces that. But drugs are designed to try to extract that dopamine and flood your brain with it to the point where you experience a high that stays for hours, right? And another chemical is oxytocin, all right? And oxytocin is known as the bonding chemical. So oxytocin is released during sex. So when a man and a woman are together, all right, when mommy and daddy love each other very much, all right? No, but when a man and woman have sex, oxytocin is released. And this chemical is what helps a man and a woman to emotionally bond with each other. In case y'all didn't know, sex is not just a physical act, it is an emotional one. Your brain has been designed by God to bond with the person that you're with. And in fact, women actually have higher levels of oxytocin that are produced at the moment of orgasm with their man. And so women have even more of an emotional connection to the act of sex than men do. And another interesting thing about this is oxytocin is also released when a woman is breastfeeding. That's how now it's not sexual in that sense. It's not always a sexual thing, but it's how also a woman bonds with her child. So again, oxytocin and dopamine together, these are normal natural chemicals that your brain produces. But when you watch pornography frequently, did y'all know that the effect on your brain is actually no different than the effect of long-term drug use? That when psychologists have studied the brain activity of frequent porn addicts versus drug addicts, and they cannot see a difference on brain scans. The activity is the same, the highs are the same, the chemical dependency, which we're going to talk about here in a second, is just the same. That frequent porn use and masturbation literally floods your brain with a chemical overload that your brain is not designed to have normally. So we're desired, in other words, by God. Sexuality is designed to be an intimate act with another person, right? These chemicals are normal and natural, but the problem is, right here, is that porn is a cheap, fake imitation of that intimacy that God designed. Porn is designed like a drug to try to extract these chemicals from your brain, giving you constant stimulation. Not normal, not natural. Okay? But going beyond that, just like a drug user, over time, the more you use drugs, the more you have to take to achieve the same high. Did y'all know that? Maybe some of you did. Psychologically, a lot of drug users, that first time they take a hit of whatever it is, it gives them this level of high. The second time, it's maybe a little bit less. And by the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 10th, 20th time, that high is not nearly as much as it was the first time. They've got to increase the dosage. They've got to increase how much they're doing, how often they're doing it to experience that same high. And so before long, this person becomes dependent on these drugs. Their body is so used to that high that it actually becomes dependent upon these drugs to function normally. That's why if you've ever heard of in detox programs or somebody's trying to get off of drugs, a lot of times they cannot just simply stop doing drugs. They'll have withdrawals. They'll have cold sweats. Their body will have all these physical problems that could kill them. They have to actually slowly wean themselves off of these drugs legally so they don't have the addiction. Guys, pornography affects your brain the same way. And that's why a lot of people struggle to get off of pornography. They've developed an emotional chemical dependency to having that high of this porn addiction that when they try to break free from it, it's difficult for them. It's like having a withdrawal, but on a mental level and rather than a physical level. Guys, this is what porn does when you have an addiction. Another thing that it does is it will heighten anxiety and depression. Now you may think, Tyler, I don't know about that. How is it going to increase anxiety and depression? Well, anxiety, right? Anxiety and heightening that comes from the fact that it is natural when somebody is dealing with a porn addiction, they feel shame from it. About the only place that people are going to joke about a porn use is in a locker room. But when it comes to being around your parents, when it comes to being at church, when it comes to any other aspect of your life, you don't want people to know that you watch porn. You inherently feel shame for doing it. So this shame that comes from porn use creates a desire in you to conceal that behavior. You don't want other people to know that you have that problem. In fact, it's so interesting to me that just like if somebody, and I'm trying to think of like the analogy, if you're not doing anything wrong, it's kind of like, here's like the statement. If you're not doing anything wrong, then what do you have to be afraid of, right? It's usually only people that are doing bad things that always have something to hide. They're always jumping to cover their phone, always jumping to do this, always jumping to do that. They're under a constant state of low-level anxiety because they're trying to hide something. If you have something to hide, it is going to make you an anxious person because you don't want anybody to know. And a porn addiction does that to you, especially when you're a Christian. And you know that it's wrong, and you know that it's shameful, and you know that it's sin. The anxiety for you gets even worse because you're trying to conceal something that you know you ought not to have. Now, depression kicks in this way. Once you are engaged in this porn use, you already feel anxiety and shame from it. Well, now you're going to start to feel that guilt. I'm doing something wrong that I should not do. And that feeling of guilt, when it's not addressed and dealt with, leads you to be depressed. You feel like you're a failure. Oh, I go to church and I do all this stuff and I talk about how much I love God, but secretly I have this sinful habit that I haven't gotten rid of yet. You feel like a failure. You feel like, who am I? How can I possibly be the man or woman God wants me to be if I'm over here watching this stuff? That depression comes from the fact that you have sin that you have not repented of. You have sin that you're trying to hide and conceal. You have sin that you are not fighting against like you need to. And instead of dealing with it at the feet of Jesus, you try to hide it from other people. You act like you can hide it from God. It affects your relationship with God to where, because how often does somebody who's living in a sin that they haven't let go of, how often does that person also have a close relationship with God? You can't. So as long as you're trying to hide from God and hide your sin from Him, you're not going to talk to Him. You're not going to read your Bible and pray to Him. It's like you're trying to hide, even though you know you can't hide from Him, it's like you're emotionally trying to. You're trying to run from God emotionally because you feel guilt over this sin that you haven't gotten rid of. So this depression kicks in because you're like, man, what am I going to do? How am I going to break free from this habit? And the last thing, how porn affects you personally, is it actually lowers your intelligence and your belief. Now you may be saying, Tyler, that's okay. The other things maybe, but how is it going to lower your intelligence? That sounds like propaganda. You're just saying that to scare us. I'm not. There's a portion of your brain called the frontal lobe. That's up here. You guys know where the front of your head is? All right, this is your frontal lobe. This part of your brain, all right, and I'm not a brain surgeon, but I did do research so I can kind of give you an accurate representation here. The frontal lobe of your brain is where a lot of your decision making happens, right? Your logic, your reasoning. If you're doing in school, right, you're trying to solve a math problem, your frontal lobe is going to be the part of your brain that's the most active. You're trying to figure out a problem, right? It's the intelligence part of your brain. It's the brain that thinks. And inside the frontal lobe, you have what's called gray matter. And gray matter is a substance that is essentially what your brain draws from to use for intelligence. All right. Now again, I'm not like, don't try to quiz me as if I'm a brain surgeon. All right. I'm just using the terms that the scientists use, and I know how it works. I don't know how it works altogether. All right. So don't quiz me on it. But gray matter and your frontal lobe work together to help you make decisions. Here are interesting things about porn use. Frequent porn use, just like a drug use, again, shuts down the frontal lobe while you're using it. In fact, during the act of sex, your frontal lobe kind of shuts off. Because sex and sexuality is more of an animalistic thing, all right? And you have like that kind of brain where it's kind of wired, like once you get caught up in it, it's hard to stop. Because your brain, the logic part, the thing that says, hey, don't do this, this is a bad decision, kind of shuts off a little bit. Okay, but what happens then if somebody has a porn addiction and they're watching it all of the time, every day? How much of their brain being shut off is eventually going to start to have long-term effects? Y'all know those drug users, those drug addicts you see in downtown Dallas that are absolutely crazy. How did they get there? I promise you they were not born that way. I promise you it was through drug use literally damaging their frontal lobe, damaging the gray matter in their brain, making them incapable of thinking logically and soundly after such a bad addiction. It really is the fact, and you can go and research this yourself. That's what porn use does to your brain. An addiction will actually mess with your intelligence. Now, here's what it gets even crazier, right? The frontal lobe of your brain is also the place of your brain where you have beliefs, sincerely held beliefs. So that would include a belief in God. A belief in God, a belief in a certain religion, a belief in where you're going to go when you die. This part of your brain is what is active in helping you to think through your own beliefs. And in fact, I saw an article one time. It was written by these atheist scientists, and they thought they had something figured out. The article was literally written. They said, so scientists have done a study that when they use low-level magnets and they kind of run it over the frontal lobe, kind of like, they didn't want to use the word damage because they wanted to make it sound good. But when we modify the frontal lobe, it actually decreases people's belief in God. So if we want to create a society of atheists who are done believing in this superstitious religion, we know how to do it. We just got to use magnets and do these other things, and we can literally rearrange how the human brain works so that people don't believe in God anymore. Do you know what they were admitting in that article? That in order to be a radical atheist, all you need is a little bit of brain damage. That's literally what they're saying. In order to make people stop believing in God, we're going to give them brain damage. We're going to destroy normal function of their brain. That's kind of embarrassing, dude. That's your pitch. Oh, everybody can be atheists if we give them brain damage. Okay, no thank you. All right, I'd rather have a fully functioning, high IQ brain that believes in God than whatever these lab coats are saying about, oh yeah, magnets, frontal lobe. All right, bro. You continue on with your brain damage. I'll continue on with my belief in God. Now, I want to say this as well, to kind of finish off. This may shock you. In Israel, the country of Israel, for those who, that's a country out there in the Middle East, they have a neighbor that they don't really like called the Palestinians. And the Palestinians hate the Israelis hate the Palestinians. And there's been military conflicts between these two countries for a long time, all right? However, this was back a couple decades ago. The Israeli military was wanting to move into a certain region of Palestine to kind of like colonize it, settle it, bring it into Israel's territory. And this particular colony had a lot of really dedicated Palestinian militias and fighters. They were not, in other words, they're not going to surrender, and it's going to be bloody. The Israeli military underwent an operation, took over TV broadcasting stations in this Palestinian territory, and broadcasted free pornography on public TV stations 24/7.
Is that illegal?
Nope.
No?
It's not illegal over there. The effect of this is that the Palestinian men who were fighters, they were discovering, were less likely to engage in combat at all. They were distracted, low testosterone, low mental drive. Literally, it's like when a drug user is strung out on a drug, it's like that was happening with porn use. All they had to do was make porn free and easily accessible, and all of a sudden the men weren't showing up anymore. Guys, porn is literally used as a weapon. Do we understand that this is not some lighthearted subject?
Yes.
If you think, oh, what's wrong with just watching the things every now and then? I mean, what's the problem? This is the problem. This is how it affects you. And we're just talking about how it affects your brain. We haven't even gotten to the other things yet. And if the military of a government realizes how powerful porn is as a weapon to disarm an enemy, don't you think that Satan knows the same things? Don't you think he knows how to cripple you, Christian man, Christian woman? Don't you think he knows how to weaponize porn against you to rob you of what God made you to be? I promise you he does. And I promise you he is using his weapon as spiritual warfare. You got to be aware of this. Last thing I'll say on this, for men in particular, and we'll move on to the next thing, frequent porn use and masturbation actually lowers your testosterone levels. The thing that makes you a man, the thing that makes you masculine, you grow hair, gives you confidence, the thing that literally is what makes you attractive to other women, decreases. And not only that, for those of you who don't know, there's a problem that men can have. Usually, it used to be only when men got older in age, called erectile dysfunction, meaning you can't perform in the bedroom. That problem used to be for older men, when older men naturally have lower levels of testosterone. But did y'all know that erectile dysfunction is now common among teen boys? And it's from porn use and frequent masturbation. Guys, men, you are being crippled from porn use. Your testosterone levels are being driven to the floor. You have the body of an old man as an 18-year-old. Porn is a weapon, and the enemy is using it against you. Women, you don't have to worry about testosterone, but all the other effects that we just talked about are true for you. Everything else we talked about is true for you just as much as it is for men. Okay, let's move on to how it affects your relationships, all right? Here's how it affects your relationships. First thing, isolation. So here's the problem. A lot of people, unfortunately, are single. And when people are single, they feel lonely, all right? This is not new. This is not new information. Most of you guys, maybe you're dealing with that now. Maybe you feel lonely. Maybe you're waiting for that perfect man or woman that God has for you. You're holding out. You're like, man, I just need somebody in my life, whatever it is. When people are single, oftentimes they feel lonely. And some people, when they're lonely, turn to pornography. Okay, so here's how this creates a sense of isolation. Porn increases and makes the loneliness worse. Because here's the deal. If you're already dealing with external loneliness, you don't have somebody that you're dating or married to. You already have that external loneliness. If you turn to pornography as like an out, like this is how I'm going to try to fulfill this void that I feel in my life from being single. I'm going to try to pursue it. Maybe this will make me feel better. What happens after is that feeling of loneliness becomes even worse. Because now, not only do I have external loneliness, now I'm internally realizing I feel like a loser now. Now I'm watching stuff on a screen to try to fill the void. Now you're not just dealing with external loneliness, not being in a relationship. Now you're dealing with an internal loneliness, feeling like a loser. Man, I'm over here watching this stuff on a screen when I wish I could have a husband or wife. Porn use increases feelings of isolation and loneliness for single people. Makes it so much worse than it already was. So can I tell you, I don't care how lonely you are in the real world, in your external life, can I promise you that turning to pornography or drugs or any other thing is not ever going to make you feel better about it. As soon as you come down off that high, you are going to feel even worse than you did before. Even more angry at yourself than you ever have before. Can I tell you, this is the worst out you could possibly have to fill any void in your life. But here's the deal, though. We all need attention. We're designed to desire intimacy in relationships. That's why people don't like being... The vast majority of people want to be married one day. They want to be in a relationship. They don't want to be single the rest of their lives. There are some exceptions to that. There are some people, they're enigmas. They're mysterious. How do they do it? They really have no problem being single. All right? But most people want to be in a relationship. Most people want to have a significant other. We need, as humans, listen, we need intimacy. We need emotional intimacy. But here's the problem. This is not where we get it. You're not going to get it from porn. Porn is a fake ripoff designed to mimic intimacy without actually giving you the real thing. It's only going to rob you of what you should have. It's not going to give you what you don't have. All right, y'all track with me on that? Here's the next thing. Dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction. In a relationship, right, biblically speaking, the only time you should be having sex is within marriage. So let's assume you're married. in a distant future, 30 years from now, everybody in here is married, all right? Except for the 1 or 2 people that are going to be single their whole lives. Huh? 40, yeah, all right? I'm not saying you'll get married in 30. I'm saying you will already be married in 30 years, right? I think that's a safe number. Probably most people in here will be married in 30 years. Okay, but listen, you're married. Now I want you to imagine this. Guys, listen. In the Bible, fidelity, meaning loyalty to your one spouse, is what is expected. Now, let me ask you this. How are you going to expect yourself to be mentally loyal to your one spouse when you are mentally sleeping with thousands and thousands of other people? Comparing what you're seeing on the screen to what you have in front of you. Wishing what you had in front of you looked more like what you have on the screen. Guys, women, what is on the screen will never compare to what you have in real life. What you have in real life cannot compare to what's on that screen. Listen, if you really want to play it out, I think everybody, if you're being honest, there are many people out there that look way better than you. You got to be honest. I know there are men out there that look way better than me. Everybody, listen. Facts. Double true for you, Micah. All right, but listen. But pornography, listen. A porn addiction is all about finding whatever it is that your exact perfect taste is. And see, a lot of people will develop really specific. I want a woman to look exactly like this because that's what my porn preference is. Then they'll get a wife, maybe as close to this imagination of perfection, but then when normal life kicks in, she starts having babies, all of a sudden her body's changing. It's no longer that pornographic perfect image you had from when you were a teenager onwards. And can I tell you this? And this is maybe going to freak you out, going on to the infidelity part here. Cheating. People who have an active porn habit, I want you to write this down, are 300% more likely to cheat than those who don't view porn.
Repeat.
Those who watch porn are 300% more likely to cheat, statistically. You know why? Because what's on the screen is more important to them than what they have in front of them. Why do I need to settle for one woman when I can have whatever woman I want to pursue at a moment's notice? What kind of behavior does that train in you if you have that addiction? If you're using pornography, it's not about, hey, I have a real life, romantic, self-sacrificial love for what's on the screen. No, you don't. You're pursuing what's on the screen for your own personal pleasure, and that's going to carry over into how you treat your woman, how you treat your man. And as soon as you find somebody else better looking, you'll make every excuse in the world to leave who you have for something else. Pornography does that, and it's sad. Which is why I think, and if anybody has this idea, I remember when I was younger, and by the way, I'll go ahead and just close this. I did struggle with the porn addiction in middle school and early on in high school. When I was getting into high school, I started getting free from it. I was doing good. And I had the thought, it'll be so much easier when I'm married to never be tempted because then, marriage, it's all there. Can I tell you that's not true at all? Being married does not get rid of a temptation like a porn addiction. And if you currently have a porn addiction and you don't take care of that now, and you have that porn addiction all the way up to your wedding night, can I tell you, you will suffer in your marriage drastically. That porn addiction ain't going away because now you're able to have sex with one person. I promise you're still going to be mentally comparing the woman you have versus the women you got over here. And I'm so thankful to God that I dealt with my porn addiction when I did, so that it was not a problem. That it was not a source of pain and suffering in my marriage today. But man, it could have been. Man, it would have been much worse. And listen, here's the deal. And I've heard of faithful Christian men who did get married and were fine, but in the course of their marriage developed a porn addiction which led them into cheating. faithful Christian men get caught up in a porn addiction and it leads them to be unfaithful. Guys, being married does not get rid of that temptation. If you're mentally cheating all the time, it's only a matter of time before you do it in the real world. That's the problem here. Okay, and the last thing we'll talk about is abuse. You say, Tyler, how does it lead to abuse? How does porn use lead to abuse in relationships? I don't know if that's accurate or not. Here's how. Here's a statistic for you. If you want to write it down, it's up to you. Oh, wait, let me make sure I have the right one here. It's this. 83% of pornographic material, it's estimated, about 83% displays acts of violence, abuse, and domination.
This place what?
83%, it's estimated, 83% of pornographic material on the internet displays acts of violence and abuse. Now here's where the abuse comes in. A lot of young people, starting at 12, middle school, develop a porn addiction. They start seeing things on screen that are not like real life. They start seeing the way men are treating women on the screen that is not normal. They think this is just must be what people do. If they're doing it on porn, this must be what most adults do, or else they wouldn't show it here. They literally are being educated by porn on what is normal. And the abuse and violence that can be depicted in pornography, they think that's what women want. And women, in fact, and here's what's scary, one of the leading causes, this has been done on the same survey that produced the results about how often men and women watch porn. One of the questions was asked, why do you watch porn? And one of the leading reasons of why women watch porn was because they wanted to learn how to please their man. They were trying to learn what their man wanted because their man's desires were so perverted and abusive that they were trying to go to pornography to figure out maybe this is normal. Maybe the abusive, weird stuff that he wants to do, maybe that's just what guys want. Do y'all see how sick this is? That pornography becomes the number one training source for young people in understanding what sex and sexuality really is. So yes, porn use can and does lead to abuse in a relationship. And not just from the man to the woman, but sometimes the other way around. Lots of perverted and bizarre things that you would have never thought about or done on your own, young people end up doing because they see it depicted in pornography. Hope you guys are getting the picture here. That's how it affects your relationships. Okay, last thing, how it affects the world. All right? Whew. All right. I know it's a heavy subject, guys, but it's important that we all know these facts. First thing you need to know is the porn industry is absolutely the biggest industry in the world. We're talking making money, the number one industry of all industries, porn, by far. In fact, I'll give you the numbers so you can understand this, all right? 5.8 billion hours of porn were watched in the year 2019 on one website. In case you're trying to want to do some math, that's 665,000 centuries. That's how much time collectively was watched on one website in the year 2019. The porn industry as a whole, like all the porn websites put together, all the different strip clubs, all that whole thing put together brings in $15 billion a year. The next closest industry to that is the NFL, which brings in $14 billion. Then Netflix, which is about 12 billion. Then Hollywood at about 11 billion.
What happened to YouTube?
It's not up there. We're talking top 4. YouTube don't make it. Sorry. Point is, it is absolutely the big. Hey, I need you to focus. We're almost done. It is absolutely the biggest industry that is out there. Makes more money than any other field, all of it. Now, here's the problem. Because it is the biggest industry, because there is so much money to be made in it, there's also lots and lots and lots of sex trafficking that happens in porn. Now, we're talking about sex trafficking. I need you guys to understand, I'm not just talking about people being kidnapped and forced to perform sex. I'm talking about something as simple as this. And this happens. A woman who's attractive, who does modeling work, legitimate modeling work, by the way, not OnlyFans. Because I have to clarify, because that's a thing now, right? A woman who has a legitimate, she models and does fashion modeling, will see an advertisement for a modeling job. She'll go out to it, assuming this is a clothing brand modeling, and when arriving on site, they start asking her, hey, do you mind taking a little bit of more layers off? We want to do some more, a little more risque stuff. Hey, do you mind actually, we really want to do some stuff for a porn website, if you don't mind, right? It's not a big deal. Oh, wait, you don't want to do it? Well, too bad. We already have pictures of you that we've collected. If you don't do this, we're going to release them. Guys, sex trafficking can happen not just by somebody being kidnapped, but by somebody being threatened with violence to do one job that they did not know was going to be a pornographic job. That's freaky. That a woman innocently goes to something that she thinks is legitimate, and all of a sudden she gets trapped there with a bunch of big men telling her, if you don't do this, we're going to hurt you. Sex trafficking happened. A lot of the content that is passed through these porn websites was produced through sex trafficking of some kind. One of the scariest things that, it could have been so much worse. Just last year, April of last year, there was a 15-year-old girl who went to a Dallas Mavericks game in Dallas. 15-year-old girl went with her father. She went to the restroom. And I don't know how this happened, but in the process of going to the restroom, she was kidnapped.
Well, her father?
Her father wasn't there. She just went by herself. Somehow was able to be smuggled out of this place, gone. So the father contacts the police like, I don't know where my daughter's at. We were just at the game and all this other stuff, and she's just gone. 11 days later, she was found. You know how she was found? There were explicit photos of her posted online advertising as if she was a prostitute.
Oh.
She was kidnapped by 8 different people that were involved in this prostitution ring, and they took photos of her against her will, posted it online, and it made it seem like this is an adult that's wanting sex for money. Sex trafficking happened in Dallas at a Mavericks game last year. Guys, this kind of stuff, I need you guys to understand, it's not the extreme examples. This is normal. And see, a lot of these porn websites, the biggest ones out there, they do not actively monitor or take down content if they suspect it is illegal. They don't care. Because they make money off of people watching that content, whether it's illegal or not. They don't care. Y'all know Jeffrey Epstein? That guy the pedophile a couple years ago, was arrested, had a big old island, he was a billionaire, gets arrested and suspiciously dies in his jail cell and the camera stopped working. This man was unbelievably wealthy, had his own private island. He was literally trafficking children to this island and allowing politicians from all across the world to come to this island and sleep with these children. And one of the beliefs is that how he had so much money is that he was actually filming these politicians doing these acts and then using that as blackmail against them. Hey, you better vote this way or else I'm going to release this footage. Hey, the next time you see a politician do something that doesn't make any sense and seems completely evil, you might start asking some questions about, are they controlled? I'm just saying, this is legitimate stuff that happens in the real world. Sex trafficking, guys, listen, sex trafficking would not be the problem that it was if pornography was not so in high demand. You can't make money off an industry if there's no demand for that industry. You can't make money sex trafficking people if nobody's buying it. You say, Tyler, but I would never do something like that. I would never sex traffic. Yeah, but hey, how do you know the content that you've watched was not somebody that was sex trafficked? And every single view you give that video is another excuse for those sex traffickers to do it again. Now so you see how your personal habit doesn't just affect you anymore. Your personal habit may be contributing to the very existence of sex trafficking. Not directly, but by your views and by your contribution, by that advertisement money you bring in with your views, you're encouraging it. We don't want to hear that. It's like, oh, Tyler, man, you're making me feel bad. Yeah, I'm trying to because I need you to understand how serious this problem is. Okay? That's sex trafficking. Now let's talk about how it grooms children. How many of you guys have heard of the phenomenon? This is, and by the way, 3 years ago, this was not a problem, so I didn't even talk about it. The phenomenon of drag queen story hour. Have y'all guys heard of this? This phenomenon where men, usually men, dressed up as women in very sexual ways or risque ways, will go to a public place and put on a performance as a drag queen in front of children, basically pedophiles, doing softcore pornography in front of children. This stuff, you may think, oh, Tyler, that must be something like California, right? They wouldn't do that in Texas. There's been multiple drag queen story hours and drag queen shows marketed towards children happening in Dallas over this last year. It's everywhere. You're saying, Tyler, okay, but how do we know that like that kind of stuff is like actually sexual? Let me show you a couple of pictures, all right?
We don't agree to that. We must agree to
First of all, no, hold on. This top left one, you can see this little boy, about 10 years old, walking along this little strip as if he's a drag queen with this man dressed as a woman. And by the way, I don't know if you can see it from there, but this man's V-cut thing with his fake boobs, his nipples are poking out. This man over here is performing sexually on a stage, and these children are handing out dollar bills.
That's pushing it. That's pushing it.
Same thing here. It's the same. This little girl here handed this drag queen a dollar bill. And parents are sitting there encouraging it. Guys, you know what that's called? It's called grooming. If you ever do studies on this, one of the things that pedophiles do, if they're trying to get a child to get into a sexual relationship, they will try to slowly introduce a child to increasingly sexual things. Because children don't understand. Their sexuality hasn't even developed yet. They haven't gone through puberty. So a child sees something that's bizarrely sexual. They don't understand what's happening, but they trust the adult that's showing it to them, thinking that this adult is trustworthy. If the adult is showing me this thing, it must be okay. Guys, the only time you're giving dollars to performers is when you're at a strip show. Why would an adult man dressed as a woman want a child to become used to the idea of giving them money while they perform, other than to groom that child into being okay with that kind of sexuality? Now, okay, let me ask you this question. 3 years ago, this was not even a thing that I'd ever heard of. 3 years ago when I did this series initially. Let me ask you this question. Does that not show then that the problem in our society, the increasing sexual degeneracy that we see being pushed now onto children, it didn't start there. Where do you think it started? Let's go all the way back. Let's go decades ago, when the only time you could find porn is in a Playboy magazine. People started, you know what? It's just a magazine. It's just a couple of pictures. Who cares? Not a big problem. Most people are still Christian. Most people still get married before they have sex. What's the big deal? Now more people are not getting married, having sex before marriage. Oh, what's the big deal? If they love each other, why does it matter? Now porn becomes an internet thing. Oh, what's the problem? Everybody watches porn a little bit. It's just you want to see people. What's the big issue with that? Now gay marriage. Now homosexuality. Things that were never considered to be normal, all of a sudden are now showing up in all kinds of pornographic content. And now what do we have? Oh, now public opinion changing. Most people are now okay with gay marriage. Well, how did that happen? It didn't happen overnight. But people in their own personal lives became more and more tolerant of sexual sin. And now where are we at today? Now we have drag queen story hour where children are being sexually groomed in our face. Can I tell you, it didn't start like that. Our society did not start that way. It got there through a long line of permitting sexual sin and pornography to the point where now you can't escape it. It's everywhere. It's on Netflix shows. It's on social media. You're going through your reels, and you got stuff showing up in your feed. Can't escape it. Now it's so normal that people think dressing in a sexual way and going out in public is acceptable. That's how normal it is in our society. Didn't used to be this way. Guys, That's normalization. And I'll finish this part on this thought right here. You guys may have heard this before, you may not have. In regards to Gen Z in particular, it is reported that surveys have been done asking Gen Z how they identify sexually. You know what they found? 35 to 40% of Gen Z identifies as one letter of LGBTQAI+. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, asexual, polyamorous, plus the Disney Plus community, all right? Now, okay, hold on. 35, y'all listen, hey, I'm almost done. 35 to 40% of Gen Z identifies as some form of being gay or queer. Can I tell you, do y'all know what the number is for the whole nation of people who identify? It's 2%. Gen Z alone, 40%. Does that sound like everybody's just all of a sudden being born that way? That makes no sense. What's happening? Normalization of pornography and deviant sexual behavior. Children are not just getting onto Pornhub and watching a guy and a girl. Pornhub will recommend to you anything and everything that gets uploaded to its website. And so now you have young children. And by the way, I want you to see some worse things. This little girl, this is a man. She literally allows her to rub his crotch. This is a little girl with, again, another man with fake boobs, fully exposed, walking around while the mom puts this in the caption, "Children belong at drag shows. Children deserve to see fun and expression and freedom." Children, Gen Z, is being groomed into thinking this is okay. You may say, "Tyler, I don't think it's okay." But yeah, can I ask you, what do you think this little 4-year-old girl is going to grow up to think?
It's okay.
What do you think? What do you think that 10? Hey, no, I need y'all to listen. I'm almost done. What do you think that 10-year-old girl is going to think?
That it's okay.
Now all of a sudden, the public acceptance of things that were never accepted makes a lot more sense when you realize it's not coming from biology. It's coming from being groomed. It's coming from the porn industry. It is coming from society that pushes this stuff down our throats 24/7 and says, there's nothing wrong with this. The last stop, by the way, of this long train of sin is the acceptance of adults having sex with children. I hope y'all know that's coming. I hope y'all know that this is why this stuff is happening now. People like this are paving the way for that to become the next thing. And if you are against children having consensual sex with adults, then you're just a bigot. Just like you were when you weren't okay with two men. Because what's the difference? If you're going to say one's wrong and not the other, and we're going to say children can consent to being a transgender and going through surgery before they're an adult, why can't they consent to sex? You see what I'm saying? That's not my argument. That's the world's argument. If they can consent to knowing what gender they are before they're an adult, why can't they consent to sex? Apparently, 4-year-olds know everything now. And if they think they're a man and they're not, well, we just go with it. This is where our society is leading us, and I hope you guys can understand the concern. Now here's what I want to finish on. I am going to finish now, all right? I have a verse. I told y'all, this entire time, if y'all know, I have not quoted the Bible at you. I have not told you from a Christian perspective, this is why pornography is wrong. No, I've only quoted you stats, statistics, and facts. And the point of me doing this, listen, was to make the case that whether you're looking at it from a non-religious perspective or a Christian perspective, there is no defense of pornography. None. There's not a psychological defense of it. There's not a defense on a relational level, and there's not a defense in regards to how it affects the world. There's no defense of pornography. And so for me to criticize it, I'm not merely criticizing, because you have to, because you're a Christian, you have to say pornography is bad. I just showed you why it's bad, and I didn't use the Bible. I want y'all to understand, this is not just a religious issue. Although I think it is spiritual. I think this is spiritual warfare. But it's not just that. See, it affects everybody. This verse that we have right here is actually the theme verse of the series. Romans 8:6, and you can fill in the blanks with the underlined parts here. Right? It says, "For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Guys, the focus of this series as we go forward, I just laid out the problem. Unless you want to tell me, Tyler, no, I still don't think it's a problem. You haven't proved it to me yet. I'm pretty sure we're on the same page. The rest of this series, listen, is going to be how do we undo this problem? And can I tell you, most of the advice that you've probably heard or been given about how to overcome a porn problem is terrible advice. Usually the advice amounts to, well, you just need to delete certain apps. Well, you just need to have like an internet filter. Well, you just need to have an accountability partner. Well, you just need to do this and do that, and that'll fix it. Guys, pornography is so prevalent everywhere you look, you can't possibly 100% escape it. It's okay, so if that's the case, even if you just got rid of a smartphone and you got rid of Netflix and you got rid of social media, you did everything in your power to physically remove it from your life, you drive down the road and there's a billboard. You drive down the road and there's advertisement for some political campaign with a transgender drag queen story hour in it. Okay, how do we deal then with the problem if we cannot completely escape seeing it? That is the purpose of this series. It is not to tell you to burn your phones. It is not to tell you how to put a Band-Aid on top of a bullet wound. The purpose of this series is this verse right here. How do we go from being carnally minded, which means sinfully minded, a mind that is controlled by a sin desire, that leads to death. That leads to suffering. That leads to hardship. That leads to hurt. That leads to addiction. That's what a sinful carnal mind leads to. But to be spiritually minded is life and peace. That is the challenge. How do we go from being carnally minded to spiritually minded? The answer is not going to be found in trying to go back and pretend you live in the woods with no technology. That's not how you become a spiritually minded person. Guys, and I'm going to tell you this, the battle against pornography, if you remember nothing else from tonight, I want everybody to listen. The last thing I'm going to say, I promise, I'm being serious.
You still got to say prayer.
I am going to say a prayer, but the last thing I'm going to teach. The battle against pornography is in the heart. It is not with your hands. It is not with your phone. It is not against your social media. The battlefield for pornography is your heart. You have a heart problem. And listen, if you are struggling with pornography, I hope that you come to every single thing and you don't miss a single one. Because you need it more than anybody else. I wish I had a series like this when I was in youth group and I didn't. Because that was the awkward conversation, guys. Just don't watch it. No, I wanted an answer. How do I overcome it? That's what this series is about. How do I have a transformed heart as a Christian? How do I overcome the things internally that are keeping me stuck in this loop of going to pornography? Whether you do it because you're filled with lust, whether you do it because you have a void that you're trying to fill, whether you do it because you're bored and it just became an addiction. Regardless of that, we're going to go through biblically how to change this heart of yours to overcome the battle from within. And, by the way, like I said, if you don't struggle with this, I want you guys, listen, I want you to come and don't miss any of these too. Because even if you don't struggle with it, I can almost guarantee you know people who do. They may not have told you they struggle with it. You may have friends that right now, at school, are struggling with this. And if you don't know how to help them, then can I ask you, who's going to help them? Nobody. They're not going to go to their parents and ask for help. If they're going to admit anything to anybody, it's going to be you, their friend. So even if you don't struggle with this, you at least need to know, how can I help those who are struggling? What actually good advice can I give them that will point them in how to fight this battle on the inside so they're not stuck here? So that is going to be the purpose of this series. So tonight was just talking about the problem. I ain't got no solutions yet. I do have them, but I'm not teaching on them. You got to come back next week. And we're going to start with lie number 1 that we got to overturn and correct if we're going to fight the battle against pornography. That being said, bow your heads, close your eyes. Let me say a word of prayer. I got to get y'all out of here. Dear God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for everything that you've done, God. I know that tonight was a much harder talk because, God, it's just talking about all the horrible things that porn has brought into our lives, into our relationships, and into the world. And so, God, I pray that if there's anybody in here who's struggling with this right now, that tonight was the night that, God, you put that spark in their heart of hatred towards pornography. That they see, God, how it affects not just themselves, but everything else around them. That God, if nothing else, you give them that drive and that passion to say, I want to burn this industry down to the ground simply because of what it does to people. And God, I pray that that energy and passion is carried over into next week when we start talking about how to be free from this addiction. How do we biblically come to your word and find freedom from this internal problem? And God, I just pray that over every person in this group, in this room, every Christian here, that God, they would make this a very important battle in their lives. They would not check out and go back to what they think is normal, God, but they would put in that work, put in the passion, the energy to get here, to be a part of this, God, and to find freedom in Christ. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, go downstairs, see what they got in terms of food.